I struggled really badly with this video. Usually I just turn on the mic and speak, but this time I found it difficult to do so time and time again. I've spoken about Vagabond a multitude of times, but this time I want to focus on the arc that in my humble opinion is one of the best I've had the pleasure of reading. Communicating why in a precise and engaging way, however, is proven challenging. Since the arc is full of so many different messages at once, I fear that I'm not able to communicate them properly. My thoughts keep overflowing, but no matter how hard I tried controlling it all, I went days without any success, and eventually days turned into weeks. I want to structure this brick by brick and force my thoughts to be in order, but maybe I'm going about this in the wrong way. Regardless, the arc begins in chapter 302. The main character of this tale, Musashi Miyamoto, who you should be familiar with by now, has gone through quite the journey. He has made giant improvements and was even capable of defeating over 70 men on his own. But throughout his journey, he's lost his connection to the heavens, a harsh realization when contrasted with the man that is like water, Shusaku Kojiro. The chapter is titled Children of Earth. Musashi encounters a boy known as Iori, who he stopped from chopping up the corpse of his dead father. Instead, he gave his father a proper burial. Thinking that the boy was about to do something heartless, Musashi then remembers that was the description given to his younger self quite often. Musashi has confronted his past time and time again throughout the entire story, but he will continue to do so in the upcoming chapters. He decides to stay with Iori for a moment, seeing the boy is all alone, and unknowingly finds purpose outside of the blade, opting to cultivate the land into something that can be fruitful and provide food. This on top of a moment earlier where Musashi refuses to show Iori fully his blade, I think shows how Musashi has been trying to move away from the life of killing and death that he was submerged in. While plowing the land, he's told to stop and that the land is useless, but he continues anyway. When finished, he says tomorrow they will plant, only for it to rain and flood the soil. After eating, he goes outside and slashes at the water, showing an impressive display of swordsmanship, and here we get one of the most iconic panels in Vagabond. These chapters put a heavy emphasis on earth and water. Visually, it's all over the place throughout these chapters, but why? I continued once again to struggle to get my thoughts in order. Again and again, I tried to fix up the groundwork in my mind, only for the thoughts to overflow and flood the earth again. Much like what happens to Musashi in chapter 303. In anger, he lashes out, and when he lands on the ground, he looks up at the heavens wondering if it's laughing at him, but then a realization hits. He thinks about the people who told him it was foolish to work on the land. People laugh. The heavens merely watch over with a smile. The heavens could be seen as many things, whatever you choose really, but when things go wrong or fail, we shouldn't point at the heavens in anger because the heavens aren't involved. We shouldn't depend or blame the heavens, only acknowledge it exists. It is up to us regarding our victories and defeat. We as people can mock each other when we fail, but the heavens are simply there smiling regardless. Musashi earlier told Iori that plowing and harvesting is life, but what would Musashi know about such a thing yet? He only stubbornly pursued his quest to be invincible, and just like when he was killing and had gained victory after victory, or now that he lies defeated to the water once again, the heavens simply looked with a smile. Once again, he devises a plan to beat the water this time, but once again he loses. He then thinks about the man who's like water, as I mentioned earlier, Shusaku Kojiro, who is described as free and beyond grasp, and much like the water he is facing, if he fights, he will lose. He then goes outside and looks at the river, examining it while thinking about Shusaku. Realizing the water is slow here, fast there, it conforms to its surroundings and yields itself, flowing instead of being hard and rigid like the earth. And then it finally hit. Literally, Iori just pushes him into the water. As I said earlier, there seems to be a theme here with earth and water. This can be seen with the actual physical struggle of Musashi trying to protect the earth for only the water to overcome it, but it's also a representation of Musashi himself. You see, earth represents stability and confidence, very positive traits, something Musashi had gained over his constant victories, but there's also the reality that earth is rigid, stubborn, and unwilling to adapt to change without being broken. This being the opposite of Shusaku Kojiro, and their approach towards swordsmanship is a physical reflection of the way they've each gone about life. Musashi trying to be invincible under the sun, he had gained strength but his approach was rigid, trying to close the distance, overcome and defeat his opponent, but that wasn't true strength in the end. Shusaku, on the other hand, was one with the sword, and so one with the heavens. Rushing water, narrow stream, fast, piercing. Depending on the terrain, the flow of water is completely dependent on external forces. Water just yields itself to that. External forces determines its shape, but water is still just water. It will always remain water, completely free. This chapter of realization is appropriately titled The Path of Water. As earth can be seen as stubborn, water is seen as flexible. Musashi had been in search of the title of Invincible Under the Heavens, but the issue with that is he was under the illusion that the title was permanent, when in reality it is just a word. Because just like that title, life itself is ever-changing, and seeking some sort of permanent solution to life is completely wrong. His rigid fixation caused his separation from the heavens, as, quote, fixation is the way to death, fluidity is the way to life, end quote. He had been spending his time trying to fight the water when the key was to be like water, willing to adapt and change and concede that things are out of our control. We must simply flow with the path life has for us, but yet do not lose our identity in doing so. Bruce Lee's famous quote I think applies here. Quote, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. If you put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend, end quote. I can't force my thoughts with this video. I can only allow myself to flow with each chapter and look at what's in front of me. Musashi later, with some help, is able to create a path for the waters so the soil won't flood again and ruin the earth. The help of others will become more important as we go on, so keep it in mind. He then thinks about his younger self, connecting once again to the infinite. I'm going to be honest, the first time reading this I was completely lost, but as I read it over and over again, he had spent his entire life trying to be invincible. But that was foolish because that is simply a word and a word is limited. When he needs to feel the flow of what's going on inside him, the natural flow, he shouldn't box himself in with just one word because then he won't be able to grow past it. Just prepare yourself, and what's next after that, let nothing get in the way. Let things be the way they are. Much like the soil and the way Iori described it, now he is gaining back what he had once lost as a child, the ability to look inside and be himself. Infinite, limitless, not bound to anything, flowing like water. One must be like water, oneself and true to oneself, simply willing to go along the path life gives us and the changes that come with it, letting go of what we cannot control, and with that Musashi is able to understand true freedom. His efforts to defeat water were in vain because water could care less. It's not about winning. Once again, as Bruce Lee said, there really is no opponent because the word I does not exist. A good fight should be like a small play, but played seriously. When the opponent expands, I contract. When he contracts, I expand. And when there is an opportunity I do not hit, it hits all by itself. That is what being one with the sword and being one with the heavens means. One must be like Shusaku and be like water. In teaching Iori in the next chapter, he tells him that he is a vessel, allowing the infinite inside to flow out. In fact, everyone is a vessel, but what's inside of all of us and out in nature is all the same, and realizing his victories by brute strength meant nothing. You are no longer yourself, but connected to something far greater, like water going down a stream and connecting to the ocean. And that is beyond being invincible. After creating a canal for the water, they now need seeds, and this is when Shusaku is introduced into the story. A grumpy, lonely old man who's really good at farming, who refuses to give Musashi the seeds, saying they don't want to join him because they will be killed, criticizing Musashi for trying to bully around the soil, as Musashi had done previously with his blade. It's important to note that he had been going by the name of Takezo, but his cover is blown when men attack the village and is forced to drive them away, once again giving in the urge to fight. He can't farm, but he can fight. He even refers to them as damn bugs, an apt description given what Shusaku has said earlier about how swordsmen are like locusts, only caring to devour for themselves. And Musashi defeats them, showing them the difference, showing his might even if it's a lie. Show how much more mighty you are than your opponent, even if it's a lie, as long as it seems that way in the moment between you and your opponent. It's also important to point out that there are men in search of Musashi and wanting to take him back to Kokura Castle, but at first he refuses. He has indeed realized much, but that does not mean he will be free of struggle. First, Musashi must further be humbled to understand the next major lessons in order to be free. He has the pieces of the puzzle, but he's missing a few still. Locusts destroy the crops the village has, which pushes them into hunger and even starvation as the winter comes as well, but let me not get ahead of myself. He was capable of scaring off 18 men by himself, but powerless in stopping the water on his own, powerless to stop the locusts, and once again powerless to stop the harsh weather, as he will soon realize. Once again, the men returned right after the locust swarm, but Musashi refused to go, saying, quote, "It's not clear. I want to be strong. Not just wanting to, but to actually be strong. I'm done traveling around in pursuit of beating the invincible. I don't have to go anywhere. I'm staying here." As things become more dire, soon the villagers will have to start working with one another more and more as more pass away from the starvation. Some of the villagers are even called out by Iori when they tell Musashi to leave, and this is easily one of my favorite quotes in the entire series. The sight of a single person struggling to get stronger is hard to take when you've given up and are doing nothing. When everyone's down and out, it's easy to forget our despair, but as soon as there's someone different, it all becomes too apparent, so they try to get rid of you. When they can't even do that much, they despise you and shun you, so they won't have to face themselves. But as the hard times come, they keep trying but fail to get Iori's land to be fruitful, until it is pointed out that they have been working on the wrong side of the land. They begin to work all the way from step 1 again as the winter approaches, and Musashi finally begins to understand the soil is alive. It's not about him wielding the hoe. Don't grow up. His body is only a prop, just as it was with the sword. He finally lets go that everything he does is to be strong and for the sword, and finally when he understands that he cannot close himself off, he succeeds and Iori's land floods properly. Or should I say they succeed, because he's no longer doing it on his own. Though regardless of the current success, the harsh winter then hits. The important thing to take away from all of this is despite all of Musashi's power that we have seen him gained up to this point in the story, there will always be things he cannot defeat. Or well, at least not on his own. He is fully humbled, needing the assistance of the other villagers, and when things get even more desperate, ask for help from the men of Kokura Castle. He's not only forced to realize something new, but then has those new realizations put to the test in the most brutal of ways possible. He realizes that being strong is letting go of his pride. He can't overcome nature itself or even a small field of rice, and so instead of giving into his old ways, he looks within himself, the free self. If he had no arms and no legs, what would he be? And that is a kind man. His true strength, the infinite inside of him, is not this brutal killer, the invincible one under the sun, but a kind man willing to help others. Kindness. Out of kindness for the villagers, he agrees to go back to Kokura Castle once the village is taken care of, and so the men assist Musashi in bringing food back so what's left of the villagers can make it through the winter. The winter passes and word spreads to Takuan that Musashi asked for help, and it's in this conversation in the chapter titled Pure and Clear that the core of Vagabond shines through. Quote, "I was born to fight." That's how he described himself. "Kill me." He also said life has no worth, and he's absolutely right. It has no meaning. As long as you're only concerned about your own life, life has no worth. Why was I born? It is only through the support of others that one's life has any value. That is the key in the message of the farm arc. The hard times pass, and the villagers continue to learn from Shusaku, even Musashi himself. The two, who once seemed to never get along, then spend much time together. Musashi even teaches some of the women to swing a sword, but as if they had no arms. Swing the sword without the intention to fight. Although Musashi is confronted once again with his past, and he had been time and time again throughout this entire arc, Shusaku still questions. What would he know about being weak? Musashi continues to give lessons to the women, but one of the swordsmen is observing from Kokura Castle points out that what Musashi is saying seems to no longer really have anything to do with swordsmanship. I think that has to do with Musashi finally realizing that his life is more than just the sword. As he said, it's not him wielding the sword but simply being a vessel. His life is so much more than just the sword. I think Shusaku continued to judge Musashi but was not open to the change that happened within him throughout this process. Summertime arrived and farming was a success. The village was saved. In his final moment, Shusaku wishes to see the fields and asks Musashi what path he had followed. We then see a horse burdened by everything, as then Musashi looks up at the skies, free of his burden. Shusaku then collapses to the ground. How can this be? I'm grateful. I don't feel lacking in anything. If I lacked anything, it was someone with whom I could share this joy and wonder. Tell me, Musashi, about that smile of yours. You let it out when working the earth, but not in front of others. Shusaku dies, with Musashi and the others crying, and at his funeral, if you will, they thank him for what he had done for them. After many tests and many trials, the strongest that I think Musashi internally has ever faced, he finds himself new and ready to go to Kokura Castle. It was a journey of a swordsman dedicated to killing and learning how to become a farmer, caring for the weak and looking at the very things he would have once looked down on with care. That his strength came from kindness, and he could not do it all alone. A man who was as stubborn and rigid as the earth to become like water, and to not resist the fate of life, because that is the way you can be completely free, as even when he was confronted by death, he was still knowing it was in the hands of the heavens. By doing this video, I was able to really bring it all together finally. It is about maturing and discovering oneself, moving away from the illusions of the self that we create, such as the word invincible, not limiting our growth and our ability to change and adapt like water. New beginnings, change, and love. The farm arc culminates with chapter 322 titled The Kitsu, or in English, Dragonflies.